Okay, hi. So you're watching this video, I guess, because you're interested in dating Asian women, or maybe you already date Asian women and you're here for some tips. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the different kinds of Asian women you can meet, specifically which country they come from. Now, you can't say that all Asian girls are the same by any means, and it's going to depend very much on which country they're from. I just wanted to create a list where I talk about my least favorite to most favorite Asian women depending on which country they're from. So here we go. Number 10 probably is my least favorite women on the whole, although the ones I've met from Thailand tend to treat you as though you're not good enough to go out with them until you do certain things or until you prove your status. And it's quite common actually for Thai girls to kind of put you in the friend zone even when you've made it clear that you really like them. So that can be so frustrating if you focus a lot of your energy and time on a girl and in the end she just acts as though you were friends even though you clearly made it clear you want more. They'll treat you as though you're somehow not good enough. What they're really looking for is a high status man. It doesn't really matter how good looking or how old or young you are, as long as you've got the money. For most of them it seems to be that's all they're looking for, unfortunately. So I don't generally have a good relationship with Thai women for that exact reason. Number 9, slightly similar, we come to the Philippines. Now there's some cute girls in the Philippines, just as there are in Thailand, but they tend to be quite conservative and they're often only looking for marriage. So if it's short-term casual dating, it's going to be a lot harder to meet and go out with Filipino girls for that purpose. So number 8, Indonesia. Indonesia is an interesting country because of its many different religions. There is not just one universal culture. Now, whereas it might be quite extreme in the island of Java, which is a Muslim-ruled country where they actually have, I believe, Sharia law, in other parts of Indonesia, it's a little bit more laid back. In Bali, it's fairly westernized. You can see LGBT, and there's a lot more freedom, but I think on the whole Indonesian women, they're not terribly attractive. They don't look typically Asian. That's the other thing to remember. If you really like the narrow eyelids, the dark hair, you won't necessarily find a lot of Indonesian women match that particular profile. So that's another thing to bear in mind with Indonesia. Number 7 is Vietnam. Now Vietnam is a very hot country, close to China, Laos. It's famous for its food, for example the pho and its kind of spring summer rolls and the bao. Yeah, the food's great, but what about the women? Well, there are some attractive Vietnamese women, and there are a lot of women I found from Vietnam who are a little bit, to be honest, they're not terribly attractive. They've got quite average looking faces, nothing spectacular about their bodies. They've got a very strange sounding language, which is obviously very hard to learn, and you don't really even meet that many Vietnamese women outside of Vietnam. So unless you're actually planning on going there, you know, there's not much chance for you to meet someone from Vietnam in most other countries. So I wouldn't really spend too much energy on getting to meet Vietnamese women. Number 6, Singapore, Malaysia. Now they're quite interesting because a lot of women from those two countries, they are Chinese in their background. So they've come from China originally, they've settled in Malaysia and Singapore. So they might be quite similar to Chinese women, although of course they don't necessarily look like Chinese women. But because they're from, say, Singapore, where it's much more equal society, so women tend to be a bit more direct. So you might find it harder to flirt with them. That doesn't mean that you can't, by all means, go ahead, but it's just a different kind of, it's a different situation with, I think, women from Singapore especially, and they can seem a little bit more aggressive. And I've never really gone in for dating Singaporean women, although I'm happy to do so in the future if an opportunity should present itself. Number 5, so we're getting to more of the countries whose women I really particularly like, is South Korea. Now South Korea, you know, a few years ago I might have said South Korea was probably top for Asian women, but for me that's changed a little bit because there are some reasons why I don't tend to be so attracted to South Korean women, and perhaps one of the main reasons is that their sense of arrogance that somehow they are better than other women is partly down to the fact that the success of K-pop, Korean culture in general, has just led to the point where everyone wants to go to Korea and everyone's looking to go out with Korean women, which is fine. But remember, there aren't actually that many Korean women available to date, and a lot of them are much more focused on still staying within Korean society and definitely dating and marrying Korean men. So it's only a small percentage who will probably ever be available for you to date anyway. So why just focus your energy on Korean women when there are so many more Asian women out there? For example, number 4, China. China is just huge for women. The fact is that there are so many women who are turned off by the idea of dating Chinese men for whatever reason. So you can go to China, you don't even need to go to China, you could easily meet Chinese women anywhere because Chinese women are very open to traveling and relocating. And you know, especially if you live near a university town where there's going to be a lot of foreign students from China who are studying, you have ample opportunity to meet Chinese women. And what I like about them is that they are very open to that fact that they can date other men outside their own country, and they have a pretty generally good attitude toward dating. And although they might not seem the most open, it's not to say that they don't have casual sex. They definitely do, and sometimes they can be very sexually highly charged, and that's something which you should definitely pursue. So number 3, we have Taiwan. Now Taiwan is a small province. It used to be part of China. It is now independent, and therefore there's a little bit of difference when you meet somebody from Taiwan. They don't like to be called Chinese, and their culture is much more democratic, and they are generally, I've heard people describe Taiwanese women especially as being very gentle, very kind. They're very polite, and all great things in my opinion. And certainly if you just go on Tinder, you change your location to Taipei, you're going to see hundreds of attractive women, not an overweight woman in sight. So why not go for Taiwan if that's your game? And number 2, we're getting even closer, is Hong Kong. Now Hong Kong's amazing. You see, with Hong Kong, it is a former British colony, and the culture is therefore still influenced by the British rule. And what you tend to find in Hong Kong, because it's a financial hub, is that you get a lot of young, very attractive women who perhaps go there with the intention of finding a husband. And that means that you just have a much higher percentage of attractive women than you would in, say, most other cities. Even London, I mean, I can't really compare, because in Hong Kong, everybody from, you know, ordinary girls you see just going on the bus to girls who work in the coffee shop and restaurants, they're generally highly attractive. So that means that you've got amazing opportunities. If you go out there to meet women, you'll be able to meet women anywhere. And a funny story about Hong Kong is that I turned on Tinder to Hong Kong when I was out there, and within the first few days I'd gained more than a couple of hundred matches, and it got to the point where I had to turn the app off because all the time I was getting constantly messaged, and I didn't even need to message first. Now how many times would that happen in London where girls actually go to the trouble of messaging you first? It's kind of 1 in 1,000 matches over here, whereas in Hong Kong they're just so keen to meet Western guys that you will not struggle by any means. So yeah, go to Hong Kong. And the other thing is that Hong Kong is such a great city to be in generally, with its warm climate, its amazing food, and the mountains, the beaches. You can just have a great time. Whatever you like to do, you're going to find in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is near the top when it comes to Asian women. But now we come to my number 1 top choice for meeting Asian women, and drum roll please, it is Japan. Of course, Japan is such an amazing country anyway, with the culture, the history, and the buildings, the people, the architecture, the food. But honestly, when you meet the women there, it just takes things to a different level, because the way Japanese women are raised and the way they grow up, the way they talk, the way they dress, everything is so amazing. And just something as unique as their body language, for example, the way they will talk to you, the way they will approach you and relate to you is so unique, so cool, that you'll fall in love with them, I promise you, instantly. And you'll probably think, wow, why didn't I go to Japan earlier? And that's certainly what I think. I wonder why I spent so much time trying to meet women in Europe when it was such more fun just to go out to Japan and see how many women I can meet there. And Japanese women, they're physically, I find that they are slightly different towards other Asian women. They tend to have softer, more fleshy bodies. And when you come to their faces, they've got lovely round eyes. They don't seem to have such narrow eyes as you might find in other girls from Asia. They've got all kinds of wonderful hairstyles. They love to dress up, and you can see all kinds of cute, sexy girls wearing schoolgirl uniforms, Lolita outfits, through to cosplay, anime, manga style girls, and even the older women still look nice. And there's a lot of focus on beauty and makeup, hair, have a great attention to the way they look, and they're just fun to be around. You know, they love to go out. They will go out on their own, and even if they're shy, they'll still talk to you. You can meet them in bars, you can meet them in cafes. It's just, you know, it always blows my mind really when I'm in Japan how great they have it over there. If you're a Japanese guy, you know, your life is just unbelievably good. And probably why Japanese men don't really marry other women, because they've got the best women in the world right there, so why would they bother, you know? And I don't know a single English guy or a single American guy for that matter who's not at all interested in dating Japanese women. You just have the best time, and sexually they're very open. They don't have any religion that tends to, you know, make them more conservative. And Japanese women, I think, have sex from a fairly early age, so there's nothing to stop them from having sex when they're 13, although it doesn't mean they can have sex with an adult, but the age of consent is certainly quite low. And they've got a lot of sexual services, they've got a lot of these very interesting places you can go, you can chat to women, and possibly you can do more if you pay more, but everything's geared towards, you know, meeting women, and generally, potentially also sex is always available as well. But I have to say, Japanese women are number one. And the other interesting thing I find is that when you compare them to, say, women from Korea, who are very focused on striving to have the perfect image, Japanese women like to leave things a little bit more natural. And in many ways, actually, that's more interesting, because when you meet somebody who seems physically perfect, it's almost a little bit intimidating. Whereas Japanese girls like to keep things more as nature intended. So when they have teeth and they're growing up, and if the teeth aren't completely straight, they won't necessarily have braces unless they've got a serious medical dentist problem. And that is how you can really tell Japanese women, because they don't all look the same, and they've got quite unique styles, and they won't all follow the same fashion by any means. And the way they talk is very cute, and Japanese is probably the most attractive Asian language. And that's probably what helps me to learn it as well, because if I was trying to learn Thai, Vietnamese, it'd be very off-putting anyway, because it simply doesn't sound very attractive. Whereas Japanese, it's a very sing-song language, and it certainly sounds very feminine, especially when young women are speaking. And there's a lot of cool words which you can learn in Japanese that make your time more fun. So I'm sure if you are interested in Japanese women, you'd probably want to learn Japanese as well. And I'll certainly suggest a few good sites where you can do that. And I know I haven't mentioned all the Asian countries. So for example, I haven't talked about India, Pakistan, or some of the smaller countries like Myanmar or Laos. I'm sure there are great women from those countries. I haven't met them so much yet. And let me know which your top choices are for Asian women. By all means, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.